So now we will talk about storytelling in general. And I found this infographic, let's call it infographic. To me, it's like a piece of art. I don't know if you ever came across this and saw this, but I found this super useful. And it comes actually, it was produced in a conference about storytelling, but it was not in the library field. But everything that is written on this screen is very relevant to what the storytelling is all about. I really like this one. Human stories have more impact than boring policy. So, and I think that comes back to emotions. And if we compare like just a pure report with data and the story, so if I give you data, I give you information, right? But if I turn this into a story, I give you more context, I give you emotions, and it really is that human voice that plays on our emotions as well. So the strong story would really have a human voice. So we need to use a plain language without the jargon, librarians' terminology that people would not understand. So we need to be detailed, and also to demonstrate, to show, and not to tell. Okay, there are plenty of things that you'll be able to read yourself, but one thing is something that we need to contemplate before we start to talk, to work on our story is that there are people who would likely listen to us and people who would not. And it depends on if this is interesting for them. And that's why it is important that we adjust our story to our audience, right? And as from the end, before the lunch, I understood that you may have talked already about audiences and how important it is that you adapt to your audience. And also that things that I will tell you later about the structure of our story, not everything will be adaptable, like for your target audience or your situation in general. So, but there are some things to consider, and first of all is the medium through which you tell your story and what is your stakeholder interested in. And it's good to know and to learn about our stakeholders as the persons. Do they like just to read short messages on social media, or do they really prefer physical media, to have the printed copy on the table and read that? Or is it about a handout, or they want to really read a full report? Is it about the summary or a comprehensive explanation of things backed up with plenty of data and charts and things? And this is the generally. There are people, and you would agree, some like stories, some like data. There are combination, but really people will fall into one side or another side, and it's good to know before you talk to someone. And infographics versus text. Of course, I can't believe that someone would not like infographics, because they really developed over the years, since what we had 10 years ago to what we have today. We really learned a lot of how to make nice and neat infographics highlighting the most important things. So that's first thing. But then something that we need to consider when we tell a story is how much time do we have to tell it, okay? And sometimes it really is 2 minutes, sometimes we have half an hour, sometimes we have a reception, we can mingle all around, but it depends on how much time our stakeholder have. And also we cannot give a report if we don't know that people will have time to really read through it and find the most important things themselves. So that's first thing to consider. How much do they know? So it is not necessary to explain basics to a person who is well informed about libraries' developments, but if you have a mayor who would never been to library, or who just started and just learning about the work you do, you would want to give more information. So that's another question to consider. How much do they care? And this is not an easy question, right? But it's good to know. And you can be prepared for someone who doesn't care, to just find that human angle through which you can raise the feelings and emotions in that person, because it is about feelings and emotions. We all are human beings and we can relate, and this is our nature to relate and be empathic to each other. But something to consider. Who do they listen to? Maybe it's not you who is telling that story. Maybe it's someone else. Okay? And what are their goals? And this is the most effective. And this is something that has driven all the thinking behind the library map of the world of the SDG stories part. Because the main goal for us is to touch feelings of those policy makers across those SDGs. Would it be the literacy increase, which is the goal of education ministry? Would it be generally culture? Would it be employment? So we need to know what those people want to achieve in general. Also, if you go to your municipality, it's good to know what are the major goals of the municipality in this year or in a longer term, so that you can then fit to what their needs are, and there is a bigger chance that they will listen to you. That's why, and also because the SDG framework, as you saw, is also very technical. There are all those indicators behind, and that governments are expected to measure those things really scrupulously, let's say. So we decided at IFLA that what we want to have on the library map is evidence-based, and that needs to be based in data. So we cannot just work with the assumptions, and of course we as librarians, we know that we are making a difference. But if it's not backed up with data, so there is no real and proven evidence from the policy maker's point of view. Okay? I like this nice infographic that I found, is that delicious story looks like a cake. On the top there are candles and it's a triangular. And it actually plays very well together with this. And this is probably something that you have seen already in this training, and maybe you already thought about it. So we were looking for something that would work across the world, would be simple to understand, but also simple to explain what type of data we want to have in each story. And we found that the logic model works very well for us, because it all starts with the conditions, what the community actually need, what is the problem, and through this we can connect to SDGs. If this is literacy, so we want to know, we would do some community needs assessment to understand where things are, and if this is something that our library would need. We would plan our actions in accordance to that, and we would use our inputs to do some activities in our library, which would then lead to outputs, outcomes, and impact, right? And this is where we will focus on measurement and evaluation to measure our outputs either in an automatic way or by hand. It depends on our development, let's say. But we really want to focus on outcomes. And when it comes to data, so we thought that we need to play with all those data. So when we have community needs assessment, we have our focus on community, and let's call it now community data. It can be called many different ways, but we also want to have performance data when it comes to outputs, and outcomes data when we talk about the outcomes. Okay, so we thought that we will explain what the context is before the program. We will then tell what the library is doing to solve that problem and what was the outcome. So that's how we came up with that every story needs to answer 3 questions, which is why, what, and so what. So yes, so that's the same kind of thing. So, and when it comes to the structure of the stories that we have for the library map, all of them has more or less similar structure. It will depend, of course, on the development of impact evaluation in each country or something else, or the availability of data in general, but it has to describe what is this that the community needs, so that we understand what's the problem and how that library is helping to solve that. We want to briefly describe what the project is about, and we want to have demonstrate impact. And so far the biggest challenge is the last one, is because not everyone is measuring impact, but that's exactly what we need to do if we want to attract the attention and show that contribution. So we produce something that is called Storytelling Manual, and you'll have a link where you can go online and download it. I'll tell you, it has 30 pages, it's not long, okay? Part of it covers, also, can you distribute that? Part of it covers what the SDG framework is all about, and then it covers all those 3 areas. It talks a little bit about the visual material and about the pictures, about the copyright that we need to take care of when we publish content online, and how to get it into the library map. But in reality, people don't read 30 pages. That's why we created this, which you have as a handout now in front of you. And this explains all those 3 things. It also has the first part. So our idea was that if you go question by question through this flowchart, you'll be able to understand if you have that story which fits those 3 requirements. So the first part is actually about the project itself, because we receive a lot of stories about activities that libraries do for librarians to build their capacity to serve users. Of course, the beneficiary will be users, but not in this project. So we are looking for projects which are main beneficiary is the community. Okay, that's why the first thing there. And now I will go through all those 3 areas to just explain a little bit more what we are looking for. So if under the question why, so what we want to know. We want to know, first of all, where is your community? Because in reality, I can tell you that I receive stories where there is no mention in narrative in which city it takes place, or sometimes even not in which country. Well, I know it because there is a submission form and they select country, but because those stories go online for a global audience, it is important that you describe a little bit where is your library located, who are the people living around, what do they care about. Is because people who would read, among those people who would read the story, there will be majority who would not know anything about your community and what is important in your locality to understand how the library is helping. So we want to know, and it also depends then on which SDG this story is related to. If it's an education, so we would want to use some of those keywords, like the literacy rates are this, or the children school attendance is this, to just connect to the context a little bit, okay? And this is something where you maybe even don't need to collect new data, because there are a lot of existing resources which are at the national level, at the regional level, where you can find from the municipality data sets, from the government data sets, and I think it's the case also in Netherlands, where you can go and find statistics describing generally the locality of your organization. And another source here is also, there are many other NGOs who probably are doing the same thing. So they also probably looked into the community profile. They have something published somewhere, so you can just also reuse that data. But of course, if you do your own community needs assessment, this is definitely something to be used to explain, so what were the initial settings before you started the program. Okay, performance data, let's call it so, but this is basically about your project. And what happens here is that we want to keep it as short as possible, as concise as possible, because like you previously said, the less is more. So the story doesn't need to be long like this. So the shorter the better, so that you can reuse also in times when there is very little time to tell about it. But what happens in reality is that when we receive stories, it's hard to understand the scope. So it's not enough just to say we have this program, it consists of this and this. We want to have these statistics inside to understand if it's a one-time program or it's an ongoing program for years, and you've been counting the participation or the number of events of the program for years. So we want to have those statistics included here. Also to describe a little bit what were the partnerships within the program, so it's understandable so what's the scope? Is it small or is it very big? How many users participated? And the data that we are using here is everything that you can express in how many. It's not about how, it's how many. Okay? General statistics. And then when it comes to impact, we call it outcomes data. It's because impact can be scary for many librarians around the world. It doesn't need to be complicated, but it is for many people. And we try to explain in simple terms. So what do we mean by impact? So first of all, and I'll finish with that, and then the data can come from many different things. But this is the place, if you had a program, you will have to do your own impact evaluation. So this isn't something that someone else can do for you. So the source of data will come from impact study. Would it be a questionnaire? Would it be a focus group or observation? The most interesting thing where librarian didn't actually understood that they did impact evaluation was the story we still didn't publish, but we'll publish soon. Comes from Argentina, where teenagers worked with elderly to teach them how to use the smartphone and focused on using WhatsApp so that they can get in touch with their families living elsewhere. So what they did is actually after the actual training in the library, those youngsters were chatting with those elderly people as part of their homework. And one of the things they needed to learn is how to record a voice message. So they asked them to record those voice messages and send it to someone of the program coordinators. And they gave a lot of testimonials. They shared those testimonials, like the recordings, with us, and it was like a full evaluation of the program, which not only showed that they have developed that skill, but also the actual recording itself was about how it actually helped them. So impact evaluation can be different. It doesn't need to be difficult. But the main thing here is that in this part we talk about people. And sometimes that is hard for us as librarians, because we also think, oh, impact is that they started to come to library more often. But it's impact on the library, it's not impact on them. So we want to know what changed for them in their lives after they came to the library and participated. I think you saw this, and we believe that everything, every input that we put inside, would it be staff, resources, money, collections, everything, will lead to outcomes. But sometimes what happens is that also when we tell the story, we just stop here. And we stop in the outputs and we don't focus that much on outcomes. But when it comes to advocacy and storytelling, this is where we need to focus. And it is not about our libraries, it is about our people. And the one last thing before I'll give you a practical task is this, is that at IFLA we see, and we also try to communicate, that impact is not difficult. It can be different things. It starts with the simple knowledge. If you give a training to some target group, of course they will know more after that. So you measure before and after, and this is also impact. It's just a short-term impact Of course, when they have knowledge, they will start to use that knowledge, and they will develop the skill of using the computer, going home and doing it on their own. This is another level of impact, let's say, and impact here, time there. So skills development takes a longer time. This will lead to the change of their attitudes, and within the SDG framework, you may have noticed there is a lot about empowerment. And this is something that you can then measure in terms of being confident about doing something and being more empowered. And that would lead to the change of behavior. I will start to separate waste more often after attending the library's program and learning that this doesn't need to be difficult and things like that. And of course, the long-term impact will then lead to improvement in life conditions. Would it be the communication? Would it be the employment in a cultural or social life and things like that?